His sweat was still on my neck when I opened the motel room door. I could still feel his fingertips buried in places my husband had not touched in months. The scent of motel-grade linen, stale air freshener, and lust clung to my blouse as I rushed into my car, hands shaking, thighs sore, makeup ruined. And yet, I drove home. I drove home to cook Zachary Carter his favorite dinner, roast chicken with garlic mashed potatoes and green beans sautéed in olive oil. I had just been ravaged in a cheap motel room, and now I was basting a bird with rosemary, lying with every glance and every smile. I stood in the same kitchen where I used to dream of raising our children, now praying he could not smell another man on my skin. This is my story. I am not here to ask for sympathy. I am here to tell you how betrayal begins with a whisper and ends in thunder. Before we dive deep, I want to thank every single one of you for clicking on this story. If you are a returning viewer, you already know how much you mean to me. And to the new ones, welcome to a place where we tell the kind of stories no one else dares to. If you have not subscribed yet, please do so right now. It is what fuels this channel, and I cannot wait to see that number tick up because it tells me to keep going. Make sure you comment your thoughts below as this story unfolds. I read every single one. My name is Amber Lynn Carter. I am 35 years old, a suburban housewife in Marietta, Georgia. Blonde hair, green eyes, yoga 3 times a week, and a smile everyone says lights up a room. I am married to a man who has not made love to me in nearly 11 months. His name is Zachary Carter, an accountant, predictable, polite, loyal to his routines more than to me. The man I slept with, his name is Mark Daniels. He is the mistake I could not resist. And this is how it all began. Mark had always looked at me like I was more than a housewife. Even in college, when I was still learning how to love myself, he called me dangerous. When we reconnected at the college reunion, he whispered that same word in my ear, sending electric shivers down my spine. It did not take much. I met him at Motel 7 on Roswell Road. Room 208. I remember because I almost did not go through with it. I sat in my car, key in the ignition, stomach twisted like a knot, until he sent a single text. You deserve to feel alive again. He opened the door with that same smirk from college, older now, more defined, weathered by life but still devastatingly charming. I stepped inside, and the door clicked shut behind me like a moral trap sealing in all my guilt. We did not talk much. There was no need for apologies or pleasantries. He kissed me like I was oxygen and he had been suffocating for years. His hands were firm, almost angry, and mine clung to his back as if the world would end if I let go. I cried during it. Silent tears. It was not from pain or joy. It was from the loss. Because I knew once this happened, I could never go back. I remember lying beneath him, staring at the cracked ceiling of that motel room, biting down on my lip to keep from screaming. It was not just sex, it was punishment, release, desperation, all tangled into one dangerous act. And then, silence. Breathing slowed. Our bodies curled into the kind of messy, intimate not only lovers understand. Mark stroked my hair and whispered, I missed this. I missed you. And I knew I was in too deep. An hour later, I was in my kitchen. I tossed rosemary over the bird, the heat from the oven fogging up my glasses. My body still buzzed from what had just happened. I kept checking the clock. Zach would be home by 6:30, like always. The scent of roast chicken filled the kitchen, hiding the perfume that Mark's neck had rubbed off on me. I changed clothes. Scrubbed myself in the bathroom until my skin turned red. But no amount of soap could wash off the shame I felt. I folded napkins. Lit candles like I used to. Poured his whiskey with 3 cubes of ice, just the way he liked it. I smiled at the mirror. Practiced the act. When Zach walked through the door, he kissed me on the cheek and said, "Smells amazing in here." I laughed. A soft, sweet, lying laugh. "Dinner is ready," I said, my voice calm, heart screaming. We sat. Ate. Talked about his day. Taxes. clients, weather. He never asked about my day. He had stopped caring somewhere along the way. As he bit into the chicken, I watched him. Watched the man I had loved for 12 years, wondering how we had turned into strangers sleeping in the same bed. And yet, I still loved him. That was the worst part. But love is not always enough. The house was quiet that night. After dinner, Zachary went straight into his home office, just like he always did. I cleaned the plates, set the dishwasher, wiped the counters, and watched the last of the chicken bones slip into the trash, wondering if he could somehow taste my betrayal. I should have felt powerful, like a woman who took control of her pleasure. Instead, I felt like a ghost inside a body that no longer belonged to her husband, no longer belonged to herself. Zach and I had been married for 12 years. In those 12 years, he had never hit me, never raised his voice, never cursed me, not even once. But it was the silence that killed me. The kind of silence that builds up like thick fog in a marriage, so heavy you cannot see what is ahead, but you keep walking because it is all you know. I lay in bed that night, facing the ceiling fan, sheets tucked tightly under my chin, while Zachary typed away on his keyboard. He did not touch me. Not even accidentally. It had been like that for 11 months. Our marriage was not always empty. We met at a friend's wedding in Charlotte. He wore a navy blue suit and a navy blue smile to match. I remember the way he watched me from across the dance floor. I had been tipsy on cheap champagne and wearing a backless red dress that made me feel invincible. He said I looked like someone who could ruin a man. I told him I already had. We laughed. Zach had ambition then. He spoke of starting his own financial firm. He told me he wanted to buy a lake house before 35, raise 2 kids, and keep Friday nights for Chinese takeout and movie marathons. He was passionate. He was sweet. He made love to me like he was afraid I would vanish. I married that version of him. But years changed us. Somewhere between the tax audits, the miscarriages, and the mortgage, Zach's spark faded. He stopped looking at me. Stopped asking about my dreams. And I started looking elsewhere. The reunion was held at the old Civic Center 2 towns over. I did not even plan to go, but Rachel, my best friend from high school, begged me to come along. "You need to feel alive again," she had said. And Mark Daniels made me feel just that. He was my college boyfriend, my first everything. We broke up after I moved back to Georgia and he accepted a job in Seattle. I loved him, but I wanted stability. I wanted something Zach promised. The moment I saw Mark at the reunion, all the air left my lungs. He was broader now, salt and pepper around the temples, and his smile was still crooked and perfect. We talked over drinks. Innocent at first. He asked how I had been. I said I was married, but not happy. He said he was divorced, but still a dreamer. I should have walked away when he touched my hand. But I did not. Over the next few weeks, I lied. Not just to Zachary, but to myself. I told myself that meeting Mark for lunch was harmless. That laughing with him was just a breath of fresh air. That memories were not a betrayal. But it became physical. Once, then twice, then again. Always in motels. Always in the middle of the day when Zach was at work. There was something intoxicating about it, the rush, the secrecy, the ache of wanting. Mark awakened a version of me I had buried under grocery lists and laundry baskets. And after every time, I came home and cooked dinner. Like a good wife. Like nothing ever happened. I should have known the bubble would pop. Zachary was not stupid. He noticed the changes. I lost 10 pounds in a month. I started wearing lingerie to bed again, not for him, but because it made me feel powerful. I smiled too much. I hummed while folding clothes. He watched me with quiet confusion. Said things like, "You seem different," or "I like this version of you." And then came the message. It happened 3 days after the roast chicken dinner. I had just stepped out of the shower, towel around my waist, when I heard the faint vibration from the vanity. My phone was face up. Open. I had forgotten to close the thread. Mark. That mouth of yours is dangerous. I still taste you. Zach was holding the phone in his left hand. His right hand trembled. Not from rage, but something deeper. Something far more terrifying, disappointment. I froze. My heart dropped into my feet. He said nothing for a long time. Just stood there. Then, in the most fragile voice I had ever heard him use, he whispered. So this is why you have been glowing? I reached for the towel tighter. Zach. He handed me the phone. Walked out. I followed him into the kitchen, still dripping from the shower, still clutching the towel like it could shield me from the collapse of our world. He sat at the same place he always did. Staring at the same spot on the wall. I could hear the ticking of the clock behind him, every second louder than the last. You could have just told me, he said. I tried. You stopped listening. You stopped talking before I stopped listening, Amber. We both had tears in our eyes. His hand moved slowly across the table, and for a second, I thought he was going to hold mine. But instead, he laughed. Bitter and broken. And then he said something I will never forget. You want to know the real punchline, he said. You are not the only one who has been lying. I blinked. What are you talking about? He reached for his wallet, pulled out a folded photograph, and tossed it onto the table. My eyes widened. It was a picture of him, with a woman. A familiar woman. Blonde. Young. Too familiar. My blood turned to ice. Her name was Tessa. She had been our babysitter 2 summers ago when I took on a temp job at a real estate office. She was 19. Zach had been sleeping with her. The world stopped moving. I could not breathe. I was furious. But more than that, I was disgusted. With him. With myself. With everything. We were a pair of liars, cooking each other dinner while cheating on opposite sides of the same marriage bed. So what now? I asked. Zach shrugged. We live in this house until we figure it out. Until one of us is brave enough to leave. Zachary and I did not speak for 3 days. We still shared the same bed, the same roof, the same stale morning coffee routine, but we became shadows crossing one another in silence. When he revealed that he had slept with Tessa, our former babysitter, I had felt the same stomach-churning disgust I imagined he had felt when he saw Mark's message on my phone. We were both cheaters. Both pretenders. Both prisoners in a marriage that had become a war zone of secret sins. But what made it worse, what made it unbearable, was that we were still pretending. Pretending to be a married couple. Pretending to be sane. On the 3rd night, I had had enough. I stood at the foot of the bed, wearing a nightgown I used to wear back when we still made love with the lights on. Zach was lying with one hand behind his head, scrolling mindlessly through his phone. Tell me the truth, I said. He looked up. I took a breath that scraped my lungs. How long were you sleeping with her? He set the phone down. 3 months. It started after you took that job last summer. I did not plan it. It just happened. You let it happen. He nodded. Just like you let it happen with Mark. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. But all I did was sit at the edge of the bed and cover my face with both hands. I was not looking for someone younger, he continued. I was just looking for someone who looked at me like I mattered again. My voice cracked. I did. For years. I kept looking even after you stopped trying. He sighed. And when you stopped, someone else started. That sentence punched the breath out of me. We were not just broken. We were exhausted. 2 people clinging to the ruins of a life they built with good intentions and terrible communication. Later that night, I could not sleep. I lay awake in the dark, staring at the ceiling fan again, only this time, my thoughts were louder than the hum of the blades. I turned to Zach. "Can I ask you something?" He opened his eyes. "Did you love her?" His expression did not change. "No. But you needed her." "Yes." That honesty hurt more than any lie ever could. I sat up. My voice trembled. "Do you love me?" He stared at the ceiling for a long time before answering. "I do not know. I used to. I think I still want to. But I do not recognize us anymore." Neither did I. That weekend, I packed a single suitcase. I told Zach I needed space. Time to think. He did not stop me. I drove to a short-term apartment rental on the other side of town, a dull beige building with no memories, no pictures on the wall, and no echoes of old fights or cold dinners. I stood in that apartment the first night, staring at myself in the bathroom mirror. No makeup. Hair in a bun. Lips dry. Skin pale. I looked like a stranger. And in a way, I was. Mark found out I had left Zach. He called me. I did not pick up the first few times, but he kept trying. And one night, after 2 glasses of wine and a playlist that hurt too much, I finally answered. "Amber," he breathed into the phone. "Are you okay?" "I do not know. Can I see you?" I should have said no. But I was lonely. Desperate. Fragile. And stupid. He came to my apartment the next night. He brought Thai food. Red wine. Nostalgia. A dangerous cocktail of the past that made the future feel temporarily bearable. We sat on the couch, our legs tangled, his fingers tracing my collarbone. "I want to try this with you," he said. For real. No sneaking around. But something inside me cracked. "Mark. I do not know if I want anything right now." He froze. "After everything we did? After everything we said?" I was escaping. I was not choosing you. I was running from my husband. His jaw clenched. So I was just an escape plan? I shook my head. No. You were a mirror. You showed me everything I buried. But you are not the solution. I need to fix myself before I latch onto someone else. He left angry. I cried alone. And for the first time since this mess began, I chose not to lie to myself. I wrote Zach a letter. It took 3 hours. 4 drafts. 2 breakdowns. I wrote about how I missed him. About how I hated him. About how I hated myself more. I wrote about the silence. The resentment. The sexless months. The empty glances. The way we both failed each other. I ended it with the truth. Maybe we cannot love each other back to life. Maybe we are just 2 people who once had something beautiful and did not know how to keep it alive. But I will always love who we used to be. And I hope you find someone who sees you again. Even if it is not me. I slipped the letter into his mailbox late at night. Parked down the street. Watched the lights in the house I once called home. And I drove away. I got a job at a local interior design firm. Part-time. Nothing flashy. But I loved it. I started journaling. Seeing a therapist. Taking long walks. I even cut my hair, short, sharp, and symbolic. Zach and I finalized the divorce quietly. No screaming. No lawyers at war. Just 2 people who finally accepted the truth. We were no longer right for each other. A week before the divorce papers were filed, Zach asked to meet for dinner. Neutral ground. We met at a quiet Italian place off Powers Ferry Road. We hugged awkwardly. Sat across from each other like old friends who used to be lovers. He looked thinner. Tired. But softer. I read the letter, he said over his lasagna. I figured. I cried. So did I. We talked for hours. Laughed. Apologized. Remembered. And when the check came, he reached across the table and said, "I hope the next person sees how incredible you are." I smiled. I hope the next person does not need motel rooms to remind me of that. We parted with peace. That was the closest thing to closure I had ever known. I still have nights when I miss the old life. When I think about the roast chicken. The wedding photo. The first kiss at the wedding in Charlotte. But I also know I do not miss being invisible. I tell this story not to glorify infidelity. Not to paint myself as a hero or a victim. I tell it because this is what it means to be human. To want. To fall. To burn things down just to feel warm again. Sometimes love is not a fairy tale. Sometimes it is a cautionary tale. And mine? Mine began with a lie. And ended with freedom.